Welcome to the Made for Agriculture podcast. Today's hosts are Adam Jones and Cameron Horine.
All right, folks, welcome to another episode of the Made for Agriculture podcast. My name is Adam Jones.
And I'm Cameron Horine.
Morning, Cameron. It's nice to have our co-host back on the line with us this morning. Good to see you during the summertime here. We're going to get you back into the agronomy world here with our crack team of experts. We got Shane and Craig, Jesse, and Scott back with us this morning. A lot been going on. We've been pumping a lot of GDUs into this crop. And so we're going to go around the horn here and see if we can get an update from everybody on what's going on. So Shannon, I know you've got places to go today, so I'm going to let you go first so you can turn your camera off and move on if you need to. So what's going on in Southwest Missouri?
Hey, morning, Adam. Appreciate it. Actually, a lot's been going on this week. This has been our first week of running in almost 40 days. So you name it, it's probably what happened this week down here. We'll start with wheat harvest. Wheat harvest has finally started going. Yields overall have been much better than I anticipated, especially for what the wheat had been through in the last 30 days during grain fill. A lot of 80, 90, 100 bushel wheat still. Our test weight's been a little lower, likely due to that stress there at the end with all the moisture. But vomitoxin, where fields have been fungicided, vomitoxin's been low. We are getting to the point now. This wheat was done last week before we even got started. So we're getting to the point now there's some heads starting to sprout. So we have to be a little bit more cautious going forward. I would say we're probably about 40% done with harvest. I mean, a lot has been done this week since we've been able to run. And with that, the focus has also been slamming soybeans in the ground right behind the combine. Look at the 7-day forecast. It doesn't look very favorable for field activity. So, I mean, guys have been rolling long hours. I know our crews have been running long hours trying to get caught back up. So just make sure we're being safe when we're running those long hours like that. We got to make sure we're keeping safety in the back of our mind. But overall, pretty happy with the wheat. Can't control Mother Nature, but even through, what it did throw at us, I think a lot of our major practices is what's helped us maintain our yields and help maintain good grain quality the best we can. On the corn side, we've got corn that is getting fungicide applied this week. We've also got corn that's getting side dressed and post sprayed this week. So we got quite a range going on based on planting date, either being replanted or even first planting, being there later part of May. Really no sign of southern rust yet, but we've had a lot of strong winds out of the south last weekend. We've got the perfect environment with the hot, humid weather. I expect to see it here in the next 7 days or so, but as of now, it hasn't. We are seeing some common rust show up. Quite a bit of common rust actually, and gray leaf spot's been the other big one that we've been seeing. Soybeans, we're ranging from going to the ground to R2. So those first crop beans, those guys get out early. I'd still think we're a few days, if not a week or two away from that fungicide application on them. But really we're focusing on getting those double crop beans and those first crop beans that are actually going in the ground now, getting those fields cleaned up. Battle a lot of water hemp that's been growing for 40 days without anything put on it. So we're throwing the kitchen sink at a lot of this stuff, hoping we can get it under control. A lot of paraquat going out, trying to do the best we can to get things cleaned up before we put the seed in the ground.
Sure, that's good stuff. It's good to hear that your wheat crop wasn't a disaster. I know, sometimes we poke fun at you, Shannon, for being doom and gloom, but it's good to know it wasn't all that. And I'm sure there's a little optimism with you guys haven't the last couple of years anyway, haven't been used to having so much soil moisture when you're poking those double crop beans in the ground. So definitely got the potential there to really raise something this time.
Absolutely.
So good stuff. Well, let's change latitude significantly here and run up to Craig. And I think it'll be funny because I would imagine going to be a lot of similar crop stages, just different latitudes. But take her away, Craig.
Yeah, good morning. So our kind of kick things off, I'll start talking about our corn crop because we got corn this next week that's going to probably start tasseling. There's a lot of that earlier planted corn that's maybe a couple weeks away from tassel yet. But those fungicide applications are kind of getting timed up, getting those all lined out so we can hit those optimally with plain. Been hearing some talks of Japanese beetles kind of in some of the corn too. I guess I just kind of caution guys that a lot of times that insect feeding might be a little bit, or silk feeding might be a little bit worse on field edges and stuff when you see those silks pop out. And I know there's a lot of times it seems like those insecticides go on after pollination. So just, if we're putting them on too late after pollination, it's not gonna necessarily be beneficial. So just be sure you're being responsible with your insecticide application. So TarSpot, we're starting to see TarSpot show up kind of more throughout the north retail area. So eastern side of the state, we've got some TarSpot showing up that Megan's found here this past week. Finding it in a few other counties over on the northwest side of the state as well. So I don't know that conditions have necessarily been super conducive for the spread of that disease just this past week. I mean, we've had some moisture, but it's been pretty warm, really. I think, honestly, if you look at the forecast for next week, it's going to cool back down. The nights are going to get down into the 60s, 70s, and we're, still have rain in the forecast, prolonged leaf wetness. We're more likely to see that disease really kind of take off. So, I guess just be mindful of that probably when trying to make decisions about fungicide. Go ahead and get that application put on at tassel as opposed to waiting and you get to R2 and you're past optimal timing and trying to be reactive to a disease that's already taken off. You're gonna be losing some yield potential there. So soybeans we're kind of at that R1 R2 time frame. So trying to kind of wrap up some of the herbicide applications for the most part. I think there's probably still a fair amount of those to be done. Just with the summer solstice there coming in last week, I know a lot of these beans have taken off and started flowering. So we just need to be mindful of label, be mindful of those label restrictions and do the best we can to control those weeds that are out there. Our wheat harvest has also kind of got taken off here, probably more so over on the eastern side of the state, just because we've had an abundance of rainfall over on the western side this week and have a little bit of flooding in some areas. But where we have gotten started with wheat harvest, even over here on the west side of the state prior to the start of the week, I think yields have been pretty good, looking anywhere between 80 and 100 bushel with pretty decent test weight right there around that 60 pound per bushel test weight. So think as a whole, things are shaping up pretty well on the wheat crop as well. Kind of what I got going on.
Yeah, good stuff, Craig. You're the first one that brought it up this week, so I'll kind of throw it out to you, and any of the rest of the guys paying attention here can answer the question too. But a lot of marketing dollars from some of the major companies thrown at this TarSpot thing. I know, probably not as big a deal at this point anyway for, Shannon and Jesse, but for your area, for Scott's area, there's been more product discussions about, hey, mine's better than yours at controlling TarSpot in the last 2 years, especially this year, than I've heard for a really long time. I live in Northeast Missouri. We have TarSpot in every single cornfield that is out there. Okay. So just throwing that out there. But even with the disease being present, can you guys speak a little bit to just number one, the timing, and number two, product selection based on what are still our kind of driver yield robbing corn diseases, right? It's not always just TarSpot that's in the field. So I figured now might be a good time for you guys to kind of talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, we've got, there's other diseases and things to be mindful of up here as well. So, I mean, there's some northern corn leaf blight that's been reported out in some fields. And honestly, the kind of conditions that favor progression of that disease line up pretty similar to TarSpot as well. gray leaf spot's been reported. So, I mean, you want to be mindful of all of those. Just picking a fungicide that has multiple modes of action is going to be kind of your best bet at combating that disease and getting the best bang for your buck, really. So there's a lot of those fungicide products out there that really are fairly popular. Some of the older chemistries that are maybe even branded that don't necessarily have a label for TarSpot. So I think it's probably wise, when you're making those fungicide decisions, we need to keep that in mind and kind of be looking at labels and there's some studies out there that kind of give a rating on how these different products across different companies do on different diseases as well. So maybe use some of those to your benefit as well, making that decision. Scott, I don't know if you've got anything to add to that or not.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd just remind folks, we started playing around with fungicides, over 20 years ago in corn, and saw responses when we were looking at the products, just the two mode products, the quilts, for example. And, the diseases that we were targeting then, they're still there. We're finding them this week, common rust and gray leaf spot. We're not seeing northern leaf blight that I'm aware of yet, but it's right around the corner too. A lot of gray leaf though. The one thing I guess that's changed for me, of course, now we've got the three modes of action. We've added the SDHIs. So just the consistency of a fungicide application has increased. And that was before TarSpot. The one thing I guess that has changed for me a little bit, I was always a real kind of stickler for trying to hit that VT. And I think in a lot of cases, that's still going to be our recommendation. That's going to be the best timing for kind of the whole, all of the diseases that we're looking at. The one thing, and you guys push back on this, if you need to. I know that some, I think Dr. Bishop at the university has cited some things that she's looking at that looks like delaying it may be a positive for TarSpot. So, delaying to, just a little bit past where we normally have been. Whereas in the past for me at that stage, I've told a guy, say didn't want to, it's been dry. I don't want to spray. Now we get a nice rain, we're well into, R2, 3. And, I would tell him, I said, listen, from what we've done in the past, I don't know that we're going to see a benefit. And then I've had people go ahead and do it and I've been wrong. I've had other times they've done it and sure enough, we didn't see the benefit. Now with TarSpot being a big part of what we're looking at, now I'm a little more, if we do, I still want to shoot for that timing because there is a logistical piece of all this. You don't snap your finger and then have a plane there. So, you get into wind, you get into the storm, you get into breakdowns, all the stuff that happens. I still want to shoot for VT, but if we do miss that, particularly if we're in one of these areas with the TarSpot, I'm not going to tell a guy to keep it in the jug like I would have in the past. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it does. It does to me because no matter what product you choose, obviously there's a little bit of better length of suppression there with some of the newer products. But whatever product you use is, you're just basically suppressing and suppressing continued development of that disease. And as soon as you pull the trigger on that application, there's you basically start the stopwatch. So it just depends on when you want that that protection out there. But no, I completely agree. And I think we've got one whale of a looking corn crop up here. And, so it's just a matter of making sure we've got that protection on when we need it. But no, those are good thoughts. It's just, like I said, it's definitely just heard more of it in the country as far as, like Craig mentioned, some products that don't even have a label for TarSpot being talked about and stuff like that. So I would just, consult your agronomist on what's actually in that tank mix. He made a great call out on the insecticide. I see a lot of insecticides being sprayed with the corn pass. And if you're, like you mentioned, Scott, if you're at R1 or R2, what are you gaining by throwing an insecticide in there? If there's something out there, then yeah, let's do it. Absolutely. But just to do it on a blanket basis. So there's good stuff like that. I think we just need to be talking about, and like, what are our actual driver yield robbing diseases and things like that. Sometimes it is TarSpot. Sometimes it's not. So, but no, good stuff. Sound good. Well, we queued him up early, but let's go to Scott, and you can kind of give us an update from Central.
As far as crop stages, there's still corn being planted on the east side of the region. So we've got corn that's going in the ground right now, and we've got tasseling corn being sprayed with fungicide on the other end of the region. So we've got a little bit of everything. Similar on beans. A lot of beans being planted, wheat beans, as well as just, beans, soybeans, a lot of replant. So we've got all stages there. A lot of our beans have started flowering, even moved into R2 and flirting with R3. One thing on that, we're talking about fungicides in relation to corn, but on soybeans, typically in the past, R3 has been the starting point on that. In fact, I've always kind of liked, for the same reason I said earlier, I like to cheat a little bit to the front. If I can catch the front end and the tail end of R2, that's where I want to be on soybeans. Having said that, the last few years we've had so many early beans that these beans will flower early. They kind of start that moving into those reproductive stages earlier. One thing to note, I'm gonna cheat here. I had a thing pulled up here. So the reason that I've always wanted to pull the trigger just right at R3 or a little bit before is that you can go from R3 to R5 in a little over a week when you're later in the season, as we typically have been. We obviously scout before we pull the trigger, but in most cases, in my region, if you planted a 3.8, a 3.9, at halfway normal timing, the third week of July is going to be the time to start spraying fungicide. That's just when they hit. As Craig mentioned, we hit the summer solstice. The beans now know that the nights are getting longer, and things start to happen pretty fast. But on the front end of that, there is a range of how long beans will spend in each one of these periods. So just going from R2 to R3, or let's say from R3 to R4, that range is 5 to 15 days. And from R4 to R5, that range is 4 to 26 days. Well, as I said, on the back side of that, if they hit R3 on the 21st of July, if you go to the short end of that window, 9 days, end of the month, you're there. You've already jumped to R5, at which point we do not generally see the benefit absent heavy disease, frog eye, something like that. However, on the front end right now, and guys, I'm trying to make this as fast as I can. I know it gets in the weeds. We will spend, even though they're at R3, even though beans maybe hit R3 now legitimately, R3 to R4 can be up to 15 days. So we could spend a couple weeks in that period. So, and pulling the trigger now, we're not going to carry that fungicide's not season long. So again, just kind of the same conversation we had on the corn. We want to try to time it later in the season, let it last a little longer. So anyway, if you're hearing that your beans are R2, R3, and you've always had R3 kind of burned in your brain and pull the trigger on fungicide, you may want to keep your powder dry for a little bit. And we're going to kind of revisit this week to week over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. And just from a plant material side of things too, Scott, I don't feel very good about going out there and throwing a fungicide pass on beans that are, barely over ankle or shin high, Yeah, you're not hitting the full. You give those beans another couple weeks here, and they're going to have a lot more vegetative material to put the product on. And as far as coverage and protection goes, or suppression, whatever word you want to choose as the best one there. And another thing to think about is you've probably got an insecticide in that soybean fungicide tank. And I feel better about putting that out towards the latter end of those growth stages as well, as opposed to throwing it out right now.
Yep. As Craig said, yeah, we're finding TarSpot kind of in the hot spots from last year's where it showed up first, finding around Glasgow, Higginsville. Typical, the first couple pictures are, you're kind of wondering, is that what it is? And then a few days later, it's kind of no-brainer stuff, even just from the pictures. Also, as mentioned, a lot of gray leaf, common rust. Took our first kind of SDS-like soybean to the lab yesterday. Of course, that could be SDS, brown stem. We're on the watch this year just because we're red crown rot is on our mind. this sample was from more the middle of the state, so quite a ways from where red crown rot's been found in the past. But it's a little early even for SDS. We found it this early before, but it was handy to swing it by the lab, so I went ahead and did that, and we'll find out for sure what that is. Talking about wheat, our wheat's been awesome, what I'm hearing so far. I was kind of sick about what some of our wheat crop looked like over the last few weeks. And everything, I'm hearing all kinds of 100 bushel wheat and 120 and 130, and quality's been good and good test weights and all that. We've got some rain here overnight. I'm not sure how much we ended up with, but it's going to warm up again today and probably not going to delay us too terribly long. So, yeah, that's been good. And as mentioned, I mean, we're going to have wheat beans going into good moisture, and still a lot of time to raise a good bean crop. The only other thing that I had put on here, and this is something we typically don't worry about, and I think the western side of the state can ignore me right now. Well, with the exception of down in the southwestern part of my region. As mentioned, we have a lot of corn even still being planted, beans being planted, and it's not all replant. Some of it's just finally able to get in there. We typically don't talk a lot about rotational restrictions, but I think it's probably worth maybe bringing up. A lot of our HPPDs, miso in particular, mesotrione, that's in obviously like Callisto Explorer, and a lot of our premixes, Acurons, things like that. 10 months to soybeans, typically not an issue, but we're usually a lot earlier on some of these products. Some of these will be pushed back. The fumesifin products, so like your prefixes, 10 months to corn. Starting with all the shattercane that's starting to pop up, I'm hearing a little more about Pursuit being used, either straight goods product or in some of the premixes that it's in. This is not one that I'm overly concerned about. Maybe I should be, but I guess I'm not. 8.5 months to corn. A little different than what we think about with some of the other ALSs. Low pH is where this one can persist. So that's just something to have in the back of your mind. I think that's it.
Awesome. Good stuff. Yeah, that's good.
That's
good call.
That's a good call out there, Scott. Also, I mean, for my part of the world, on herbicide restrictions, a lot of those labels are also 4 months back to wheat. We do a lot of corn to wheat, and there is still a fair amount of corn being planted. So it's definitely something to keep in mind on those plant back restrictions. Another question I have for you, Scott, I probably should have mentioned this in mine, but what other management practices do you change or do you look at differently on that corn that's going in now compared to that corn that went in April?
Well, I think this late, with all the water hemp issues we have, most of this well, I say that. I said most of the corn that we're going into right now, it's already got chemical on it, so it already would have been, otherwise it would have switched to beans. I don't know that there's going to be a lot different, Shannon. I mean, if you got something in mind, let me know. I mean, it's, when I've done it in the past, it's typically been because something got messed up and all of a sudden a bean field became a cornfield. And that's been as late as, the middle of June. We monitor it just like anything else, and, you're running top dress and all that stuff at a much later time. Typically, I mean, aside from, harvesting in, December or Thanksgiving or whatever, a lot of times we've actually benefited from picking up like an August rain that, that really helps us out. We're still early enough that we usually, beat the frost. So, aside from that, I guess I can't think of anything else. The only other thing I was going to say on that chemical piece, and this isn't to say not to worry about them, but one thing about it, when we've had issues with a lot of those in the past, it's been in the corners, it's been in the overlaps, all that. We've got a lot of sprayer technology that helps mitigate that now. That is not to take anything away from the months that they tell you, because that's a very real number. But some of these products also, when that happened, overlap was all the way around the field and triple lap in the corners, and it wasn't just 2 or 3 feet or a little pocket like you see now. Hula hoop side that you can tell got overlapped. So keep that in mind. again, don't want to downplay it to where we're not worried about it. But we also have to use the products we have to use to take care of this water hemp and other things we're fighting.
I think one of the things I've seen Shannon and Scott on stuff, especially when we were doing research plots and stuff, when we were doing some late planted corn specifically on research stuff, is that late planted corn can become a refuge crop for insects because it's late, and so all the other corn's out, soybeans. So sometimes, depending on what you have, it can become a refuge spot for insects. So being able to watch that's the one thing I notice is watching that, especially when silks start coming out, is making sure, hey, we're on top of that so you don't have issues there.
I would say the same thing on the TarSpot front. I guess that's front of mind for me up here. But when you look, when that corn's at R2 and R3 and still needs to be pumping hard, the rest of this crop is going to be, no matter what growth stage, completely covered in TarSpot at this point up here. And so, it can tolerate, I guess, that earlier planted stuff at that point would be able to tolerate a lot more than that later planted crop that's still trying to accomplish grain fill. So keeping an eye on disease pressure there for sure.
Yeah, and for down here, it'd be southern rust. So that's always a big watch out for us on this late corn is southern rust moving in late. So I almost, you decide to make the decision to plant late, you almost have to guarantee a fungicide application to protect it.
I 100% agree, Shannon. Yeah, it's one of those deals that you get to the time and the point of the year where everybody's like, oh, we've got this really bad, but it doesn't really matter anymore because our corn's, already 3/4 milk line or whatever. Well, that late planted corn's not. So it's something to be thinking about for sure. So good call out. All right, Jesse, I know you've been over there loading the shotgun all morning with all the good stuff going on down in the Delta. So hit us with it.
Yeah, I think we're back to our normal summers. As hot and humid as it's been, we kind of took for granted them dry years. And I didn't realize it till the past 5 days of 110 heat index. But, our wheat harvest is pretty well over. But it's like everybody else. Test weights aren't low, but they're not as high as we normally are. But a lot of 80, 90 bushel wheat, a lot of beans getting planted. Then I just talked about beans. I won't spend time talking about herbicides because y'all covered that for me. But we got beans spread out from just like everybody else, being planted to almost R3. Scott hit on these early planted beans. Be patient for the fungicide timing. But then again, if we got stuff seems 2-3 weeks behind it. By the time we get there, it's gonna run through these stages a little faster. Y'all hit herbicides, y'all hit that, so I won't beat that to death like I normally do. I'll talk about irrigation at the end, so I guess I'll talk about corn. Unlike the TarSpot with the southern rust, we normally try to wait, especially on normal planted corn. We try to wait till brown silk. That way we get a little more residual at the end. There's been years we go early, but that's normally when we're hearing about it. In Arkansas, moving its way up early. But we've all been saying this would be the year to get southern rust, but we're really not hearing about it as much. We've had the heat, we've had the moisture. It was foggy, has been foggy past 3 or 4 mornings up to right about now. So I'm kind of shocked we're not seeing it no more than what we are. We'll take it. I don't want to wish nothing on us, but so that's that. I think everybody's going to be done planting on the 4th. That's kind of what everybody's saying. That's our cutoff. We're a little bit further south than everybody, and it's just, there's going to be a lot of prevent plant, but we've noticed anything planted after the 4th, it's just, you're pretty well just controlling weeds. You ain't making no money. So to keep that in mind too. Whatever you prevent plant, maybe that's something we need to talk about is weed control and prevent plant acres. You're going to have to do something or you'll have a mess for the next 5 years. So kind of just keep that in mind. The big deal this week for us has just been irrigation. We had a lot of moisture. We didn't dry out as fast, but it was like a light switch when it dried up yesterday. So there was a lot of corn that got watered Monday and Tuesday. And that was more just to get ahead, stay ahead. And like I said, we were 108 most days heat index. So it was just good to get the canopy cooled off and get some water flowing through it. Now, that being said, it's supposed to rain Monday, but we all know how summertime rains are. You'll have areas that get nothing and areas that, like y'all talking about before we started, to get 2 inches. So we've got a lot of wells that'll have 4 sets run on, and you start figuring 10, 12-hour sets. That's hard to play catch up on, especially if half of it's corn, half of it's beans. So we're going to start watering beans. Some of them got started yesterday. I'm going to push some over the weekend. Even if it does rain, it won't be a disaster. But if it doesn't rain, it will be a disaster if you hadn't got started early. So just kind of better to be a couple days ahead than a day behind and play catch up. That's kind of, y'all talked about most of what I needed to talk about already. So I'll just kind of wrap it up there unless somebody got something else we want to hit. We run long today already. So
We did run a little bit long, but there's a lot going on. So
Jesse, I was going to say, you touched on something I had been thinking of here in the prevent plant acres down there. We haven't really had big prevent plant acres across our territory for a few years now. But I think you touched on something that I do think that we probably just need to remind people of is, weed control on that. When ground goes fallow, if you don't do anything with it, then all you're doing is setting yourself up for much more difficult time in the years as they go on, right? So, you think water hemp and Palmer, the millions of seeds that get produced on each one of those plants, each one of these years, and they can live in the soil for a long time before they regerm. And so you're just setting yourself up for failure in the years on. So I think that is something that's definitely important, and we need to make sure we remind people of.
that and the Johnson grass, because most of these prevent plant acres have a Johnson grass problem.
Absolutely.
And I hate to tell anybody what to do because I don't know the whole insurance part, but just me and Cody have sit and just run rough numbers for his dad and uncle. And he's kind of like, yeah, we know what you're getting paid, Dad, but if you have to fight weeds for the next however many years, or you have to work it twice, and then we're spraying $30-40 an acre to get chemistry to keep it in good standings, it's all of a sudden you'd be better off making 30 bushel beans and keeping them clean than you would be taking a check from there. And it's hard. Now, if you're on a regrade situation or something like that, you're going to do something with it. I understand, but just kind of, like I said, I don't want to tell anybody what to do on that, but just keep it in mind.
Yep, 100%. No, and you mentioned the kind of the heat and humidity deal. I know I mentioned on the last time we recorded that for my zip code, we were like 65 GDUs behind normal or something like that. I punched it in right before we turned this on this morning, and we're down to only 9 GDUs behind normal now. So you can make up ground quick. Now again, same deal. The last 3 years we've been over 100 above normal, but we're catching up fast with this kind of weather. So, guys, if nobody's got anything else, I'm going to cut it off there. I know we ran a little bit long, but there's a lot going on out there. So I'm glad we got a chance to cover it. So thanks everybody for your time this morning. I know we got a lot to do yet in the day here. So let's get after it. And thanks to everybody for listening. Appreciate your all's time as well. So
Thank you for listening to Made for Agriculture, brought to you by MFA, your whole farm solution.